comparing. Okay, and we just need to fill this in with some values. So you guys know that I always like to start my table at 0, okay? But I don't think I'm just gonna do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I might jump around a little bit. So I think I'm gonna just count by 5s here. So if I count by 5s, so 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Okay, so if I count by 10s here, that should give me a good picture of my total cost. Okay, so if I'm not buying any centerpieces, then what would my total cost be given this situation? Okay, so we know that the centerpieces are $5.50, but there's no like stocking fee or delivery fee or handling fee that goes on top of that. So if I am not buying a centerpiece, I'm not spending any money. Okay, so I would take my $5.50 as my process. I'm purchasing 0 centerpieces, so my total cost would be 0. Okay. Well, what if I'm purchasing 5 centerpieces? If I'm purchasing 5 centerpieces, then I'm going to take my $5.50 and I'm going to multiply it by 5. Okay, when I multiply $5.50 times 5, I get $27.50. Okay, what about 10? Okay, if I multiply $5.50 times 10, that gives me $55. And I'm just going to continue this process. $5.50, oops, times 15, $5.50 times 20, and $5.50 times 25. Okay, and I'm just going to use my calculator to get all of those. So $82.50, 110, and $137.50. Okay, so that's my table. That gives me a good picture, kind of I don't have every value in there, but I can kind of get an idea of what it's going to cost me based on those numbers. Okay, so now we're going to take those numbers and we're going to put them on a graph. Okay, so first thing we need to do is we need to draw our axes. So I'm going to start by just drawing carefully, trying to draw them straight. My X and my Y axis. Okay, and labels are going to be really important here so that we know what we're talking about. Okay, on my x-axis, I am talking about number of centerpieces. I don't know why that got funky there. And I'm just getting that straight from my table, so number of centerpieces. Okay, and on my y-axis, I know I'm talking about the total cost. In dollars. Okay, and before I get started labeling my scale on my axes, okay, something worth mentioning is that when we're down here at the point, the corner, that's always 0. Okay, so I'm looking at my table here, and I know I go up to 25, but I don't have 25 tick marks here. And I do want to give like a nice spread out picture on my graph. Like I don't want to have my graph, shoved into this little, I don't want it shoved into this portion of my graph. So I do want it spread out nicely. So I think I am just going to count by 1s on my x-axis, but I'm not going to make it super messy and label every single tick mark. So I'm actually just going to label every 5th one. So I'm going to count by 1s. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm just going to label that one 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10, 13, here's 15. Okay, so I can get a good chunk of data in my graph from my table if I'm counting by ones. But now I need to think about what to label my y-axis with. So if I'm going from 0 up to 15, I need to fit from 0 to, I have to fit from 0 up to 8250 on this graph. And I think if I count by fives, that might be, let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65. Yeah, I think that counting by fives is probably going to be the best option for the y-axis. Again, I'm not going to label every tick mark, so I'm probably going to do, let's see, like 5, 10, do here. I'll label every other one. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80. Okay. All right, so now I just need to plot my points. Okay, so I know that 0 centerpieces cost $0, so I'm going to go ahead and label that point right there, 0, 0. I know that 5 centerpieces cost $5.50, so there's 5. That's going to be just a little bit above that. I know that 10 cost $55. Oh, that was $27.50, not my bad. So 5 cost $27.50. So here's 20. 25, $27.50 would be right in between 25 and 30. 10 costs 55. That should be right on a tick mark. Yep. Or a grid line rather. And then 15, we're 82.50. So 15 should be exactly halfway between 80 and 85. Okay, so that gives me a nice like spread out picture on my graph. Okay, and then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to write our algebraic rule. And before we do that, we should probably define what our variables are going to be. Okay, so even though it's in our table, even though it's in our graph, we should also do this before we write our rule. Okay, so I know that x is the number of centerpieces. And it's good to get in the habit of doing this. This way you don't mix your variables up. It also helps you answer follow-up questions. And we know that y is our total cost. Okay, so in our graph, in our table, we have these labels, but when you write a rule, you don't necessarily have these labels, so it's good to write them out by defining what x and y equal. Right, and then I'm gonna just draw my skeleton equation for us to fill in. Okay. All right, so the first thing that we need to find, we know is the slope. Okay, so if I'm trying to find the slope, I'm looking at my change in y over my change in x. Okay, so if I'm looking from 0 to 27.50, if I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, I am adding, and I'm adding 27.50. Okay, so that is my change in y. I've also got to go over and look at my change in x. So from 0 to 5, okay, I'm adding 5. So when I go to find my slope, okay, my slope is my change in y divided by my change in x. Okay, so I have to take that 27.50 and I have to divide it by 5 to get my actual slope. Okay, and when I do that, I get 550. Okay, so I can go ahead and fill that in my equation. Right, and then I still need to go back and find my y-intercept. Okay, so there's two places I could look to find my y-intercept. I could look on my graph at where the point on the y-axis falls, And you can see right there that at 0 is where the y, the point is on the y-axis. I could also look at my table, and my table says when I buy 0 centerpieces, my cost is $0. Okay, so either one of those will give you the y-intercept. Okay, so my y-intercept is 0, and I'm just going to fill that in as well. Okay, so now that we have these 3 different representations, we have the table, we have the graph, we have the rule, we're going to answer some follow-up questions. So I'm going to shrink this back down a little bit. Okay, so we have 2 things that we're being asked. So question A is asking us, how much will 10 centerpieces cost? What about 20? And which representation did you use and why? Okay, so I mean, we could use any of the representations, honestly, if we wanted to. But for me, I think I would use the table because both of those values are in the table. Okay, so I'm going to say 10 centerpieces costs $55. And 20 cost $110. Okay, and why did I use the table? I used the table because those values were right in there. So I used the table. Because it showed both 10 and 20. Okay. You could use the rule by substituting 10 and 20 in, but why do it when it's right in the table? I could have used the graph for 10 because here's 10. So I could have used the graph and saw that 10 centerpieces cost $55, but the graph didn't show 20. So, I mean, it's just whatever is easier for you. I think it's easier to pull those values right from the table. Okay, so next question. How many centerpieces can the committee buy for $88? Okay, so I'm looking down my total cost column and I don't see $88. I'm looking at my graph and my graph doesn't show $88 on the graph either. As far as I go up is 85. So we've got to use the rule for this because we don't have any other option. So when we think about how many centerpieces that can the committee buy for $88, when we think about $88, we need to look at our labels, which are right here. So is $88 represent the number of centerpieces, or does $88 represent the total cost? Okay, $88 is a dollar amount, so that represents the total cost. So this is a Y value. So we're going to put that in for Y. Okay, so instead of Y equals 550x plus 0, and really we don't even have to do the 550x plus 0. We can simplify that to be 550x. So I can set that up with, instead of Y, I can set it up with 88. So 88 equals 550 times x, and now we're just solving for x. So I'm going to get x all by itself, and that operation between 550 and x is multiplication. So how do I undo multiplication? I divide. So if I divide both sides by 550, that's gone. And I'm just going to get my calculator out and take the $88, divide it by 550, and that's going to give me 16 for x. Okay, so we want to make sure that we answer the question. So we can buy 16 centerpieces. Okay, and then what did we use? We used the rule. And we used the rule because $88 was not in the table or the graph.